Okay, everyone. Now I'm going to dedicate just a short, brief lecture, very important though, on Dora María Téllez. She was a Nicaraguan revolutionary. She helped take over the Congress, the Somocista Congress in, I want to say, 78. She basically is a hero in our country because she helped overthrow as a guerrillera, that is a female fighter, guerrilla. She fought against the brutal Somoza dynasty to overthrow Somoza in 1979. And he fled to Paraguay, where he was killed. And then he was brought to Miami, where they loved him and had his funeral. Not as popular in Nicaragua, but she helped overthrow him. Two Latin Americans, particularly not of the extreme right, but to most, she's a hero. In her own country, she's a hero, right? And that's her behind me. And that's her in her, guerrillera, that is a guerrilla fighter, someone who fights. And when we say guerrillas, we're usually talking about not the conventional warfare, but insurrections, right? And I'm not talking about the January 6th insurrection, which was possibly a coup effort to create a coup against democracy, and also my birthday. So very great things happened on that day. But this is unconventional fighting against what they saw was a brutal dictator in Nicaragua, the small Central American country. Now, in her country, I've walked around with her. I know her well, etc. She's a hero. And now she's taken up her arms, not literally fighting, but hunger strikes and everything else that she can do in more nonviolent protest against Daniel Ortega, because Daniel Orteguismo, kind of, who's the president, the current president at the time of this taping, is, went a little crazy and is has imprisoned a lot of people, had an election, kind of a scam, etc. But for the United States of America and a lot of data sets out there, usually US-based English-centric data sets, she's a terrorist. This is one of the most important concepts, I think, in global politics, and I always attach it to interpretive methods. Interpretive methods is the idea, like if you've had me before or you'll have me again, is the idea, ontologically speaking, that there is a reality, but reality is what we make of it, meaning the meaning and the identity perpetuated and legitimized over time. So when Dora María Téllez, the woman behind me, received and earned the RFK Award at Harvard, that's like one of the most important, most prestigious awards you can get. I'm from the area, Paktika, Harvard Yard. She was denied entry into the country for being a terrorist, but yet she's a hero. So this is what one of the values of interpretive methods. How can someone in her own country be a hero, helped overthrow a brutal dictator, create democracy, etc., but here be a terrorist? And I believe, and I actually mentioned this to her, that the University of Maryland has this data set. Of course, it's very US-based, English-centric, of these terrorists, and she was in it. And, this is a very English-based, US-centric view of the world. I hope interpretive methods opens it up to say, yeah, maybe, something is good one place, but it's not for the other. Right? So she was a hero in her country, but considered a terrorist here. So when she went to go and get her visa, she was the only female, and I think she had a visa before, that was denied or taken away because she's the only female, I think, in the history of the United States for being a terrorist. And I think that this is very important because interpretive methods focuses on how we see the world and socially construct the world. So that's why it's interpretive. We are not like biology, where we're dealing with cells. We're trying to root out the COVID, for example. We're human beings. We live in a social world. We bring to it our experiences, our biases, our prejudices, our intersubjective understandings of the world. So with that, you can say all you want about her, but she's a hero in Latin America, particularly her home country of Nicaragua. And it's an honor to say that I'm friends friends with her. And it's an honor that, to have all the conversations I've had with her. But the thing about interpretive methods, it's the same thing with the revolutionaries. Do you think the US revolutionaries, all these forefathers and mothers of the United States, the 13 colonies, et cetera, they were sitting around in the UK saying, wow, they're great? No, we consider, the UK considered them bandits. They would have used the word terrorism if that was a word used back then, et cetera. But we won. Thank God. And we defeated the Brits, not that that's difficult, but, and then we got to write our own history. One of the things I think the values of interpretive methods is that you really want, allow the developing nations to write their own history. And a lot of times they don't. There's a famous article, Can the Subaltern Speak? Meaning, do they have the space to define themselves? And usually it's developed countries that define these developing countries. And one of the things of interpretive methods, or postmodern methods, if you want to call it that, is that the goal isn't like cause and effect, it's more of emancipation. So emancipation is to emancipate yourself of this, idea that you're a terrorist. When you're not a terrorist, you're a freedom fighter, you're a hero. And, but the emancipation doesn't stop there. Like, even though she was one of the key and central figures in the Sandinista revolution to overthrow Somoza, one of the interesting things about it is she never became one of the Nueve Comandantes. That is, the people ruling the countries after the revolution. And surprise, she's a woman. And, does machismo, is it because, is there also a misogyny, not only in Latin America, but here as well? And that's another way to look at feminism, interpretive methods, postmodernism, is that, she was denied this space, even though she was integral to the revolution, because she was a woman. So interpretive methods kind of explores these ideas, identities, and it really does have value. I know there are some people who will say, postmodernism is full of kooky people who say there's no reality. And there's truth to that, right? I mean, there's in every, I think, ideology, in every methodological, epistemological, ontological approach, you have the extremists. But I think there's value here. And also, if you are a soldier, you're a veteran of any war, you have to see how the people on the ground see themselves and their people. I mean, it was Lyndon B. Johnson that went around calling, the Viet Cong pajama people, we can smoke them out, etc. And they kept coming back and coming back and coming back. And it wasn't true. And if you're a soldier, you might see that, you get thrown into a foreign land and told, oh, you're going to be a hero, you're going to be a liberator, but the people on the ground don't think like that. And that becomes problematic. And you can see that with a lot of wars of independence from, Angola, Algeria, and other wars. Even if you don't agree with the movement, or you agree with the movement, isn't important. The idea is you have to understand how people think. And by getting a US-centric, English-based view of the world, which a lot of the academic world is, you're really not getting what's going on. So like, I had a student from Venezuela once, and he grew up, Hugo Chavez is the worst. And this was when Hugo Chavez was alive. And then he went to Venezuela. His parents took him back because the economy was booming then. The three pillars of the economy: construction, banking, and oil and mineral wealth. And he couldn't believe how popular Hugo Chavez was. And this has to do with coups, when we support coups. And it's not just the United States. Like when Russia, the Soviet Union, invaded Afghanistan, the United States, the Soviet Union invading Afghanistan. I mean, don't forget that they got in that quagmire. They failed miserably. So a lot of, I think, imperial powers, not just the United States, but any imperial power, will always say, oh yeah, we're going to go in, we're going to liberate, etc. But if you're not seen as a liberator, you can get killed. And this is exactly what's going on. Brzezinski, Carter's a national defense secretary, wanted to invade Nicaragua right before the revolution, 78, 79. It would have been a disaster because at that time, the Sandinista revolution was very popular. And, to go in there thinking, oh, we're stopping communism, because they weren't communists, but would have been a total disaster in life of American. Now, if you can see here, I'm updating the photo. That's me with her. Now, okay, don't do drugs, kids. That's what you look like. It's a terrible photo. I've showed it before. It's not flattering. Is the goatee coming back? I think it is. I keep seeing people having mustaches and beards now. Maybe I will do that. But that's a little I had to lose a little weight there. Not a good time in my life, drinking a lot of Nicaraguan cerveza, Tanya, Victoria, etc. But now I look great, so it doesn't matter. But that's me with her, Dora María Téllez, and she's not a terrorist, but a hero in that country that was taking in Nicaragua, where I actually lived 8 years. So by living outside this country 8 years, you begin to see that not everyone sees the world like the State Department, the DOD, and all these other organizations want you to see. They like to say, oh, the United States, we're doing great out there. Afghanistan was great. The Taliban took over so quickly. We don't understand, I think, as imperial powers. And again, this isn't just the United States. This can be any imperial power that invades France in Vietnam, being defeated by Giap in Bien Bien Phu, 1954, I believe the year was. I was not around then. And, you think you're going to win, then you realize that you miscalculate because you don't understand the people. So this lecture was basically about Dora María Téllez, who's a hero, got the RFK award, couldn't get into the United States. But in a lot of ways, the State Department has seen her as a terrorist. Why? This is disheartening in a way, but also this is how imperial powers like. They like to define what's going on in developing countries, whether it's the World Bank, the IMF, the United States, France, Russia, etc. They want to define what's going on. And interpretive methods becomes, there's a competing discourse out there. There's a competing narrative. There's a competing thing. Like, think about it. Sandino, who was the revolutionary who fought against the United States of America, was always considered a bandit. But then after after the Sandinistas took over in 1979, he became what we would call a hero. And here it is. They had to look for it. That's Sandino Vive. That's a memorial to Sandino, who was a hero. I took this in Nicaragua. And, he was considered a villain, a horrible person. But this is completely untrue. I mean, he was a hero to the Nicaraguans. And then when the Sandinistas brought him back, his memory, they redefined him. So there is no one solid, concrete reality. Sandino was a bandit to the United States. Then when the Sandinistas took over in 1979, he was redefined as a hero. And it's funny, they named the airport after Sandino. I've been there a million times. But then when a more conservative president, Arnaldo Alemán, got elected, he changed the name of the airport. But then when Daniel Ortega was re-elected, he changed it back to Sandino. And then Ortega went a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, saying he's never going to leave power. So all these dissident Sandinistas, but they're Sandinistas, took up nonviolent arms against Daniel Ortega, which goes on to this day. He's been in power for a bit too long. It's called verticalismo, Orteguismo, but it's not Sandinismo. Sandinismo is a broad movement, social movement that overthrew Somoza in 1979. And this shows us how we redefine history, people, events, etc. So I hope you got something out of this. It's very, very important to understand how we define the world in any kind of thing. So like national security, American foreign policy, global politics, you'll be watching this in just all my classes because it's just so important to understand that, the world is always reinventing, redefining itself, etc. So take care, everyone. I hope everyone's doing great during the COVID because the pandemic is still out there.